country was in the midst of the Civil War, those states that had seceded from the Union did not adhere to the proclamation, and slaves in those states remained unfree. Though much of the language in the Emancipation Proclamation suggests otherwise, Lincoln's primary objective was not to alienate the lives of those in bondage. Rather, his intent was to preserve the Union. Lincoln and the Union Army used slavery as a political motive to justify strengthening military endeavors against the Confederacy. Black soldiers were able to fight for the Union when Lincoln passed the proclamation, though they faced discrimination and often performed menial roles because of presumed incompetence. The Civil War ended in April 1865, and in June of that year, General Gordon Granger and his troops traveled to Galveston, Texas, to announce General Orders Number 3. It states, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation that in accordance of the United States, all slaves are free." Throughout the war, Texas was not as closely monitored as other battle states. For this reason, many slave owners went to Texas with their slaves because it was heavily neglected. Union presence, slavery continued there for much longer. After the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, slaves in the Union states drew and escaped behind Union lines or fought on their behalf. The slaves who got the news were jubilant to hear of their freedom and Juneteenth. Freedom did not come at the snap of a finger for everyone. In Texas, some people who should have been free continued to work through the harvest season because their masters withheld this announcement to reap more wages out of their slaves. This left many former slaves treated as though they were still in bondage. In the 1870s, a group of former slaves pooled $800 together through local churches to purchase 10 acres of land and create the Emancipation Park to host future Juneteenth celebrations, which is in modern-day Houston. In 1980, Emancipation Day in Texas became a legal state holiday in recognition of Juneteenth. Now I would like to give you a little history about True Vine Holiness Church. In 1919, the founders of True Vine Church were Mother Mabel Davison Taylor, along with Reverend J.J. Banks, Brother and Sister Mifflin Portland, and Deacon James Daverson. The first services were gathered under a large tree next to a vacant shed, and later to a vacant house called Top Diggins. For people in Portland, Top Diggins is when you come up Middlesex Avenue next to the ball field. There is a little street there and houses. That was called Top Diggins. That is where True Vine Holiness Church started. We were not at 398 Main Street where we are now. We were at 19 Lower Main Street, which was down underneath the bridge, where was the African American community. And when Portland decided for redevelopment to come in, They moved all the residents out, tore down the houses, and that's when Chatham Court was built. And I'm going to give you a little history about Chatham Court. The town of Portland did not want Chatham Court. And the people are going to be displaced, with my mother, Mrs. Eugenie Shaw, Ann Habino, and a group of other residents of Portland fought to get Chatham Court to be built. And my mother was the first executive director of the Portland Housing Authority. And under her tenure, Chatham Court was built and Quarry Heights under her direction. So I just want everyone to know that True Vine Holiness Church has been in Portland over 100 years, and we're not going anywhere.
Hello, everyone. My name is Devonna Dione, and I am the vice chair of the Middletown DTC, and I'm so excited to be here and support my family and my friends at this amazing first event. So I'm just going to leave you with some thoughts. So why should we remember and celebrate Juneteenth? We should because it's a call to action. We are all connected, and we want to remove obstacles that come in the way of making others feel welcomed in our communities. We as a community should be motivated to secure full independence and equality for all people. Emancipation was one step, but in many ways, African Americans and other people of color remain in bondage. Poor education, lack of access to proper health care, a massive racial wealth gap, and biased sentencing and criminal justice continue to affect minorities at disproportionate rates. Today is an opportunity to acknowledge a history that shaped and influenced our society. If we learn from one another, then we can make lasting improvements. We need to fight for equality, face hard truths, and commit to end racial injustice. We should honor the lives of enslaved African Americans and of their descendants and those who fight for their equal rights and celebrate this day of freedom. Making sure that our history is told is necessary for supporting and sustaining our growth as a people. This is why Juneteenth is a part of American history. It puts the Black freedom struggle in the middle of the American story. Sometimes we can't see how things will change. Before the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery was something that most people thought would perhaps continue forever. But the Emancipation Proclamation began America on a pathway that led to a change in citizenship and equality. And so people should realize that they have a right to demand and affect change. Thanks. Woo!
Thank you. All right, so next up we have Quentin.